I have been using Starlink as my primary home internet for several years now, and as soon as the Starlink Mini was announced, I knew I wanted to pick one up and try it out and see how well it worked out in the wild. So that's exactly what I did. As soon as the Starlink Mini was available, I ended up ordering one and using it on all kinds of different adventures. But a couple of months later, I did end up canceling service, kind of, for the Starlink Mini. So in this video, we're going to talk about how to get the Starlink Mini, how it works, how well it works, and why I ended up canceling, at least temporarily. So just a quick background for me, I live rural. We do not have access to any internet outside of LTE and now Starlink. And so once Starlink was available for us, we signed up pretty much immediately. The service was okay at first. It had a lot of disconnections. The speed was pretty good, even though there were a lot of disconnections. And over the years, it has become rock solid. It is so stable. It pretty much never disconnects. Download speeds, I'm now seeing over 300 megabits per second down. Upload speeds have not improved much. They're still right around 20 megabits per second, but it is amazing home internet. And the idea of being able to have that same internet experience on the go wherever I was in the world, as long as I had a view of the sky, was pretty enticing. And so I signed up and I did order the Starlink Mini. Now, if you're interested in a free month of Starlink, whether you're gonna get the Mini or the full Starlink dish, you can use my Starlink referral code down below. That will give us each one free month of Starlink service, which is a pretty great deal. Now, what is the Starlink Mini? So traditionally, the Starlink is just a satellite dish that you have to plug in. It connects to the internet via satellites in space, and you have a modem and a router down that's disconnected from the dish, and that gives you all your internet. Well, the Starlink Mini takes all of that and puts it into this absolutely tiny package that you can see here. This is your satellite dish that you need to connect to the satellites up in space. This is your modem, and on top of that, this is also your router that will spit out wireless internet up to, I believe, 20 devices. I'll correct that on screen if it's wrong, that can all connect to this simultaneously for speeds up to 150 megabits per second down or 20-ish or so megabits per second up. I mean, this is just remarkable. This little square that you can fit in a backpack, it's just like the size of an iPad, a little bigger than an iPad, and this gives you internet anywhere you go. Pretty amazing. Now, with this small square, you get almost everything you need. You can connect to the satellites to access the internet. You get your modem, you get your router, all in this tiny package. But there's one more thing that's missing here that Starlink does not provide, that you will have to provide, and that is power. And that's where the sponsor of today's video, Bluetti, with the AC180 portable battery station, comes in handy, because you can power this Starlink for well over 24 hours with this battery, but we'll talk about that a little bit more later in the video. Now, when you get this, what Starlink does give you is the dish, of course, and they do give you a power cable to go in the back. So it is a barrel connector that you can see right here, connects up to a standard wall outlet, an AC 120 wall outlet. And I found it kind of weird because the cable on it is super long. And if you are more stationary and you're just going to be setting this up and not moving it, I could see how that could be helpful. If your power source is inside, you need to put this out the window or something. But I did go ahead for convenience and grab this power cable. So this is just a straight barrel connector to USB-C with nothing in between. And this will power the Starlink dish. It only uses at peak about 40 watts. When it's running, it actually uses far less than that, but when it starts up, it uses more power. So make sure you just get a 100-watt version of these. I can link one down below. And this has been awesome for powering it in the car or with the Bluetti battery, or other ways that you want to power it and have a little less kind of extra cable that you're carrying around. This has been really nice. Now, I do have to mention the Starlink Mini is not for everyone. So if you see this and you go, what's the point of that? It's simply, you just don't buy it. I have a lot of people that tell me that Starlink makes no sense and they don't know why people would buy it. That means it's probably not for you. If you are often in areas without cellular service, or you're often camping or doing things like that, or outdoor living or anything off the grid, Starlink is awesome, and you definitely should at least check it out. Doesn't mean it's still for you, but if you're like, I always have internet with my cell phone when I go to work and go home, why would I need this? Then yeah, don't purchase it. But in those times when you're, say, road tripping long distances and there's those long dead zones, or you're often in areas without cell phone connectivity, this is something you definitely want to look into. Now, powering the Starlink Mini, as I said, that is something that you're going to have to do. Starlink doesn't help you with that. They don't offer anything, of course, besides the wall plug that comes with it. And the Bluetti AC180 portable power station is great for this. With a capacity of over 1,100 watt hours, the Bluetti AC180 will be able to power your Starlink Mini continuously for over 2 days. At startup, the Starlink Mini can consume about 40 watts, but that lasts only a minute or two, and then it drops down to 20 or even less watts when it's idling or when you're you're even using it. The power usage will fluctuate around that number, so it'll get a little higher and a little lower, but for the most part, power consumption on the Starlink Mini is pretty low, and that is because Starlink kept people in mind that are using this on the go. You're not going to have access to a ton of power. They weren't maybe thinking of the Blue Eddy, which is a ton of power, but that way you can use the Starlink Mini off-grid for a long, extended period of time. And if you're using the AC-180 from Blue Eddy to power your Starlink, you'll be able to power so much more on top of that. It has up to 1800 watt AC output, so you could power a coffee maker, a refrigerator, and all kinds of other accessories. There are 11 outputs, including standard wall outlets, USB-C, USB-A, and other methods to power all of your accessories. You can even smartly control the Blue Eddy AC-180 with the Blue Eddy app. On top of that, if you're camping long-term, you can use solar panels connected directly to the Blue Eddy to recharge it via solar, and recharging with those panels will be more power than the Starlink Mini can consume. So in that case, you could theoretically go an infinite amount of time using the Blue Eddy with solar panels to power your Starlink. Now, personally, if I'm camping and I am trying to conserve power and using my Starlink Mini, I would just be unplugging it at night when I'm sleeping and stuff to save that power over time, or even unplugging it when I'm not using it, because plugging in the Starlink Mini, again, it only takes maybe 1 to 3 minutes for it to connect to satellites. So if you're camping, you're probably not, hopefully not sitting on your phone the whole time. You could unplug the Starlink Mini when you're not using it. If you do need to hop on and maybe make a call or send some emails or something, plug it in, do whatever you're doing. It'll be ready in a minute or two, and then you can continue using the internet and just unplug it when you're done to conserve power. Not only is the Blue Eddy powerful enough to power your Starlink Mini and tons of other accessories, it is clean and extremely quiet as well. So power up that Starlink Mini for the long term. Grab your Blue Eddy AC-180 at the link down below. I do have exclusive discounts for you there to enjoy, and you definitely want to grab it while it's available because there is a limited quantity. Now, things are always changing with Starlink, so double check some of the things I'm about to tell you. But in terms of price, it depends on where you're located. Prices are different in different countries, and Starlink tries to bring lower prices to countries that in general have lower incomes so they can help bring internet to everybody. But in the US, where I am, it is $5.99 for the hardware for the Starlink Mini dish, and that will get you the dish and the cable that comes with it, and that's pretty much all you need. We'll talk about that in a second. And then the data plans on top of that, of course, you have to pay monthly to be able to access the internet. Now, this is where it gets pretty interesting if you're already a Starlink owner. So let's first say you don't have Starlink at all. If you want a Starlink Mini, you can pay $50 a month, and that will give you 50 gigabytes of roaming data per month. Now, if you want an unlimited plan, so you're not limited to that 50 gigabytes per month, you have to pay $165 per month for an unlimited roaming plan of Starlink. Now, where things really get interesting is if you are already a Starlink customer, which I said earlier, we are. So I currently pay $120 a month for unlimited Starlink internet at my home. So my Starlink dish is up on my roof. It's not easy to access. So even if I wanted to travel with it, it's not something I would do because I'd have to go up on the roof and take it down and do all this stuff. It'd be kind of crazy. So I pay $120 a month. My Starlink cannot travel, but I wouldn't do that anyway with my dish. So for my $120 a month, I get unlimited home internet. It does not include the roaming option though, so I can't travel with my Starlink dish. It won't work while in motion, things like that. Now, if I want that option, this is where picking up the Starlink Mini is pretty awesome. Now, of course, I have to pay for the Starlink Mini hardware. Like I said earlier, it's about $600. But for just an additional $30 per month on top of my $120 a month I already pay for Starlink, I now get this Starlink Mini in addition to my other dish, and I can take this Starlink Mini with me anywhere, and I'm able to use that while I travel for just that additional $30 a month on my bill that I'm already paying. So in terms of prices and plans, it's going to vary a little bit depending on your situation, and if it's worth it, that's also going to depend on the type of travel you do. If you have cellular internet everywhere you go, I hear a lot of people, especially when they're from smaller countries, say like, why would you ever need this? You have high-speed cellular data available everywhere you go. And in the United States, that is just not the case. There are plenty of dead zones, even really close to major cities, where you will not have any internet coverage. You may not even have cell coverage at all. Now, no cell coverage, so you can't like send a text message, is pretty rare these days, but there are definitely large parts of the United States that have no cell coverage. And there are even larger areas of the United States that have zero internet coverage or no high-speed internet coverage on cellular data. And this is where Starlink really can come in handy. Just on one of my routes that I regularly drive, there is a large span of road. It's got to be 10 to 15 miles, somewhere in that range, where there is zero cellular service. Now, this doesn't matter that much. I'm just driving, so my music might cut out that I'm listening to or whatever for a few minutes. and then it'll come back on when I'm back. But it's just something that I've definitely noticed. My maps will go away, everything will kind of stop working until I get out of that area. So this is one of the first places I thought to at least test Starlink. Not that I need it in this area all the time because it's just a few minutes and I'm just driving, but Starlink made a huge difference here. I'm simply able to power the Starlink Mini via USB-C in either our Cybertruck or our Model Y. The Starlink Mini can be secured to the dashboard or the glass roof. Either of those work. It has a view of the sky, and then you have mobile internet. Now, if you go under some trees or something, of course, you can lose service for a little bit, but I found as long as you don't have 100% constant tree cover, having an obstruction, every couple of minutes or even every couple of seconds is not that big of a deal, and your internet seems to still work fine. So as far as setting up the Starlink Mini, it could not be more simple. You plug in the power cable, you plug the Starlink Mini into your Bluetti AC180, and you set the Starlink in a way that it can see the sky. That is it. It takes less than 5 minutes. It will take it maybe 1 or 2 minutes to connect to the satellites, and you're online. That's about it. Now, on the back of the Starlink Mini, it does have a little stand here, which you can put out to lay it on the ground. And there is a correct way for this to point in the sky, depending, of course, where you are on Earth. But I found that it's not very important. In the app, the Starlink Mini can correct you and say, oh, you should twist it this way or this way and give you the optimal usage. But number one, you can use it while in motion, so in a car or something. So obviously that's going to be changing all the time. And number two, just personally, I found I've never needed to adjust the Starlink Mini after setting it down, wherever I've set it, on a table, on the ground, on a car. It's just always connected and works, and I've never had to adjust it after the initial set down. The speed of Starlink Mini, you'll get about 150 megabits per second down as the cap, and you can definitely tell that that's a software lock, because a lot of my speed tests, it will shoot right past that 150 limit and then come right back down to 150 megabits per second down. Pretty much I'm always getting that speed. I haven't seen it much slower than that. So that is great news. The uploads, again, are going to be somewhere between 20 and 30 megabits per second, sometimes a bit lower than that. And these things will vary depending on where the satellites are above you. Now, as time goes on, this is less and less evident, but sometimes you'll see the speed kind of doing this wave form where it will kind of get faster and slower and faster and slower. And that just has to do, again, with the satellites moving ahead over you. But in normal usage, or watching YouTube, sending emails, even downloading files, you're not really going to notice that happening unless you're watching the speed on a speed test. Reliability for me, I'm going to put this in a couple of different categories. Number one, just like once it's connected and you're in a good spot, reliability has been rock solid. It connects to the satellites. I've used it for a couple of hours at a time and not had an issue. It's been awesome. The second way I'm going to put reliability is actually getting this thing set up in a way you can use it. If you're out in an open field, yeah, it works. You set it down and you're connected, and that's it. I've also tried to use this in a couple of different buildings. Now you might be like, duh, you can't see the sky, but hear me out on this one. Number one was an airport. I wanted to connect to the Starlink for my own internet. It's faster, than the airport Wi-Fi. And so I found these huge windows, and I put the Starlink in the window, and it wouldn't connect. So I was like, okay, maybe these windows are facing the wrong direction. So I went to a different part of the airport where, let's say the first set of windows were facing west. Now this set of windows is facing east. And I tried this on all these different windows, and it just simply would not connect. Now, people online were saying there's some type of UV coating or something on the windows that could block this signal. I don't know if that's true, but the fact is these windows were probably 20 or 30 feet tall. They were massive, and the Starlink Mini simply would not connect to anything. So that was kind of a bummer, because I was like, hey, I have my own personal internet here, pulled it out of my backpack, plugged it in, and it wouldn't connect. So that was quite the bummer. And then another scenario I tried was in a hotel, kind of same thing. There was a window. I even actually opened the window and put it outside of the window a little bit and stuck it up into the sky. But there were, I assume, too many buildings around, even though there weren't that many buildings, and it simply wouldn't connect. I couldn't get a connection, and so I had to use the hotel's crappy, slow Wi-Fi. So even in a couple of scenarios where I would have thought, hey, I'm so glad I have this thing with me, I can just, stick it out and get some internet and, use the wireless, and this will be awesome. It didn't end up working in the way that I had hoped. So it may not always work, especially if you're in those more kind of strange scenarios. But yes, every time I've been out in an open field or can clearly see the sky or I'm outside, it's connected almost immediately and been a perfect connection every time. A lot of people ask about precipitation, either rain or heavy snow. And for the Starlink Mini, I haven't experienced much of that. I've been in light rain in the car and stuff, and it's worked no problem. But I will give you my experience with my home internet and Starlink, and that is that heavy precipitation can completely cut your signal. Medium to heavy precipitation will maybe slow your speeds down. So it can interfere better with the Starlink Mini, but usually these bouts of disconnection are extremely short. I'm talking maybe 1, 2, 3 minutes of time where you'll completely lose connection. Once that precipitation lets up a little bit, then your connection resumes immediately. And a lot of times you won't even notice because if you're like watching a movie or something, it's buffering ahead of time. But yeah, heavy precipitation can definitely affect it, but it's a rare instance that I would guess if you use this thing every single day, you'd only experience a couple of times a year. Now, the last thing I want to talk about with the Starlink Mini is canceling and starting the service. So when I first got the Starlink Mini, I didn't do anything to my service plan. Again, I'm already a Starlink customer. I already pay for the home plan. And so I got my Starlink Mini, I plugged it in and just started using it. Within a minute of plugging it in, it was connected to the internet. I was doing speed tests. I was trying it out in different scenarios, driving around with it, and it was working great. And then my bill updated. So I went from paying 120 a month to paying 150 a month. I didn't have to do anything to change my bill. I didn't have to enable the Starlink Mini. It basically just connected to the internet and added itself to my bill, which makes sense. Obviously, I'm using it, so I was fine with that. Now, I said I canceled my service on the Starlink Mini. So let's talk about that and how I did it and how that looks on my bill. So after I used it for a few months, I actually took it on a couple of trips with me, which was very helpful. I did use it like practically out in the wild. I needed some better internet because my phone wasn't connecting, and I sat in the grass and plugged this thing in. But after my adventuring for the time was done, I said to myself, I don't want to pay $30 a month for this Starlink Mini that I don't exactly need right now. So I hopped onto the Starlink website, and you can click cancel service. Now, I'm not going to lie, this was very scary for me to do because Starlink home internet is limited in the capacity that they have. So if you have the home internet and you have that $120 a month rate and you cancel, you may not be able to get back in unless you pay the $150 a month rate. And so when I saw that cancel service button, I didn't want to cancel all of my service. Starlink is my home internet. I just wanted to cancel the Starlink Mini. So when you look at your account, you can see your different devices that you own. One, of course, being I have the version 2 Dishy, and then the other one being the Starlink Mini. So if you go to the Starlink Mini, you can click cancel, and it's not that, at least when I did it, it wasn't that specific in telling me exactly what I was canceling, but it seemed I was canceling that product. So I went through with it. And yes, my next bill was back to $120. I still, of course, have my Starlink Mini, which we're probably going to be booting up here again in the next couple of months because we are taking a road trip down to Florida. And there are numerous dead spots when you're driving down the road on the highways, especially going through the mountains and stuff, where you have no service at all. And having that Starlink Mini, we're going to put it up in the glass roof. It'll be mounted up there, plugged into the Cybertruck, and we'll have internet the whole way down. It'll actually be really nice. So yes, I did cancel my Starlink Mini service after a couple of months because personally, it's not something I need on the daily available to me. But having this product ready to go whenever I am going to go on any vacation and being able to just plug it in and then pay the $30 for that month that I'm going to use it is really awesome and really convenient. So overall, the Starlink Mini is definitely recommended from me if you have the right use case scenarios and you think it's worth the price. SpaceX has said that they aim to reduce the price of the Starlink Mini in the future. So if you don't want to pay the $600, maybe wait, but who knows how long that could be. It could be 1, 2, 3 years before they're able to reduce the price. So if it's something that you can use in your camping adventures or you're traveling, I would definitely recommend it. It works great and the price is reasonable, especially because you can kind of stop and start it whenever you want. There's no long-term contracts. If you have any questions, leave those down below. Don't forget to check out the Bluetti AC 180 in the link down below, and you will see me in the next video.